If we can get everybody to just focus on the Federal Reserve System like a laser beam and drop all the other stuff temporarily and just shut them down, you'll have a chance of saving the country. You know, that's what it's going to take. And we can still do it because Congress has the authority to do it. And Congress needs you and me to vote for them to get back into office.
But for this to happen, we have to, it's up to also you and me and many others to begin educating the public as to what we're really up against.
Well,
like.
Which is that's why I made the movie.
Exactly, which is, I just totally applaud you on that.
Thanks.
Let's go, can we go into the IRS
Yeah,
now?
sure, I just
Let's
want
talk
to
about it, that's
Sure.
huge.
Well, the IRS is huge, but don't forget the IRS is just part of the Federal Reserve
Yes.
System problem. And in actuality, there is no law. I've researched this very thoroughly because I kept hearing for years there's no law that you have to pay, and I sort of poo-pooed it.
Yeah, I did too.
And they make you think anybody that says that's a wacko and a kook, you know. But there is no law. Let me just tell you straight out. There is no law that requires you to file a 1040. I researched this, and I'll tell you why there's no law. First of all, the Constitution says, okay, that there's two kinds of taxation: direct taxes and indirect taxes. A direct tax must be apportioned and done by census, which means that a direct tax, which is what a tax on your labor would be a direct tax, you can't get away from it, right? A direct tax on your labor would have to be apportioned, meaning divided amongst all the people equally, right? Mm-hmm. And an indirect tax is like an excise tax. It's like a tax that you don't have to pay if you don't use the service.
Luxury car or something.
Well, not even a luxury car came later, but like gasoline.
Right.
If you don't want to drive a car, if you want to take a bicycle, you don't buy gas, you don't pay the tax.
Right.
So that's called an indirect tax. But that indirect tax has to be the same in every state. It has to be uniform, okay? So there's two kinds of taxes, direct and indirect, in the Constitution. In 1894, they tried to pass an income tax on your labor. The Supreme Court said you can't do that. It's unconstitutional. They stopped. In 1913, to get around that Pollock decision of 1894, right, they passed the 16th Amendment, which said we can tax any income from any place forever, okay? And once they passed that tax, then people started paying an income tax on the labor. It became a third form of taxation. You had direct apportioned tax, you had the indirect tax, and now you had a direct tax that was unapportioned, okay? So you had three forms of taxation now. But, two things. The amendment was never ratified properly. It was a fraud, okay? And that's been proven. But the second point is this: even if it wasn't a fraud and had been ratified properly, even if it had been, okay, the Supreme Court in 8 different decisions that I have researched said the 16th Amendment gave the government no new power of taxation. They can't tax the labor of the American people, so it was finished. And in 1917, they stopped taxing, so they did it for 3 years, right? And so there is no tax on the labor of the American people, no legal tax, and no constitutional tax. So they've made the IRS code, right, says whatever it says, but whatever it says is irrelevant because it's not in compliance with
legal.
the Supreme Court decisions,
Right.
right? And even the IRS code, if you actually examine it, okay, even though it's irrelevant because it doesn't comply with the Supreme Court. Actually, if you examine it, there's still no law that makes you pay a tax on your labor.
Right,
Okay?
yet every one of us, well, I guess there are, 69, 70 million Americans who don't, but most of the rest of us are on the treadmill and we're paying dutifully our taxes on time each year.
Well, they make you feel if you don't pay it, you're not a good citizen. That's part of their propaganda.
Well,
And that's what allows them to keep spending money.
but in fact, it's not just you saying this. What I found very compelling in your film is that you're talking with former IRS agents and investigators who were put to the task of finding out on behalf of inquiries as to whether or not this was a legal practice,
Right.
only to find out that it wasn't legal. And in fact, some of these people who were formerly with the IRS have not paid their taxes since they found out about this.
Right.
Now,
There are many IRS agents, former agents, who have left the IRS because they did the research, and they were in there before I was.
Right.
You know, and they deserve to be honored for the work they've done. because it's a giant, in my opinion, it's a giant scam. And
It takes a lot of courage to do that, though, because what are we still up against?
well, the thing is that we're up against the police state because what they'll do is, even though there's no law, they threaten people with harm.
Right.
You see, but I interviewed the IRS commissioner, the ex-IRS commissioner, who wrote the tax code. He was general counsel to the IRS. He was the commissioner to the IRS, and he wrote the tax code. Okay, his name is Sheldon Cohen, and I interviewed him for the movie. And in the movie, he says, Supreme Court decisions are inapplicable to the IRS.
Interesting. And what does he give as a justification for that?
He has no
rationale?
justification because I put him into a corner. He couldn't answer the questions, so he was forced at the end to say, "It doesn't. Supreme Court decisions don't matter," which we all know is a lie.
Right.
So the IRS is not beyond the Supreme Court, right? So there is no law that allows the government to have a direct, unapportioned tax on your labor. Okay? Now, an income tax is defined by the Supreme Court as a corporate gain. You see, there is an income tax, but it's not a tax on your labor. An income tax is actually a tax on gains by corporations. That's the definition of an income tax in the Eisner versus McCumber case, if anybody wants to go look it up, right? And so, there's an income tax, but it's not a tax on you. It's a tax on corporations.
Right. And this has been pressed, this was pressed with many administrations, including the Clinton administration as well as now, and so it really does cut across political boundaries. And can you talk a little bit about the background? You have a bite in there, a sound bite in there from Judge Emmett Sullivan.
Yes.
Can you tell about how that came about? It was really just a shocking statement.
Well, what happened was that there's this group called We the People, and they served a petition on the government for the government to show the law that they're enforcing. We have a right to petition. Under the First Amendment, people have a right to petition their government to get answers to things. The government is the servant of the people, not the other way around. So they petitioned the government to get answers, and the government refused to answer the question about where the law is. So they went to court, and this Judge Sullivan said in his decision that the government does not have to answer the people's questions about where the law is.
Now that is beyond chilling.
Yes, we don't have a constitution anymore. We don't have a government run by the people anymore. We live in a totalitarian country today. That's the bottom line. We live in totalitarianism. And if you want to get it back, we have to get rid of the Federal Reserve System. We have to make people have the control of their government again.
Before we're all chipped?
Before we're all chipped. I know I'm not going to take an ID card, and nobody should take an ID card, even if it's in your driver's license. Because what they're going to do is say, well, everybody knows they need a driver's license, right? So we're going to put in the driver's license, which they can't turn down.
Right.
But if you just had a separate ID card, you would say, well, I don't want that card. I'm not going to take it. But if it's in my driver's license, I better get it because I have to drive.
Right.
So they're very smart people. They put you into situations where you have to take things from them. But even if it's in the driver's license, you shouldn't take it. Don't take an ID card. And I'm planning a series of nationwide strikes and revolt against what's happening in the government to wake people up, to shut down the Federal Reserve System, to stop these chips from being employed. And I expect that my movie is going to raise a lot of awareness and activity from people. People will start getting involved when they realize what's really happening and how all these central banks of the world are working together. I mean, sometimes you say the word New World Order, and people, oh, you're just a conspiracy nut,
No, that's not true anymore, though, is it?
Well, some people. And so I showed George Bush in the movie talking about the New World Order. Okay. And so the point is, the New World Order is really where all the governments of the world work, all the central banks of the world work together. They control the governments, and they can control the laws of the world. And we're going to have to be forced to listen to these laws. And the laws are about controlling us, not giving us freedom. And so unless we get back to our idea of individual rights, individual freedoms, and allowed to express yourself in the way you want, we're going to lose this game. And unless people get active and say,
Well,
I'm going to shut down the Federal Reserve System, I'm going to shut down the powers that be, we're doomed otherwise.
Is there any means beyond that? Say, for example, we're not successful in shutting down the Federal Reserve. What about strength in numbers with the individuals? What if half the country is refusing to pay their income tax, for example?
Well, half the country already does not pay it, but
Seriously, it's half?
67 million people,
Jeez,
I'm
what have I
told.
been doing?
I'm told 67 million people by the IRS themselves aren't filing. But I don't think it's all because they were protesting. I think there's a lot of that just
By default, they couldn't pay the taxes.
by default,
Right.
or they're trying to skip it or whatever, you know. But
But
I
how does
mean,
it-
even if we can't get the Congress to shut down the Federal
Right.
Reserve System, then you shut down the country with massive strikes, get everybody to stop. I mean, you just get it. People, because people are going to begin to realize, because we're coming near the end game, and things are starting to accelerate,
Right.
you know. And people looking at George Bush is going to declare martial law, they think.
Yeah, there's a
which
lot of fear
wouldn't
about that.
Wouldn't surprise me.
Right.